I'm Chip Freud, and this is the Artist Spotlight, conversations with contemporary artists based on 5 simple questions that explore the artist's journey, creativity, and sources of inspiration. Welcome to this episode of the Artist Spotlight podcast. Today I'm pleased to welcome Annie Kinney. Annie is a native of Ireland who now calls North Carolina home. Her acrylic paintings often depict inviting landscapes from both sides of the Atlantic. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chip. Thank you so much.
Well, this is a treat. We first had a chance to meet down at the 311 Gallery sometime last year, and I was just taken with your landscapes. Even though we're in very different medium, there's a certain similarity to our aesthetic, I think, in our approaches to landscapes. As you know, our podcast is really all about the 5 questions. Okay. But before we roll into that, can you give the audience a little idea of a current project you're working on or something maybe you just finished?
So I just finished the coastal painting of a trawler out of Moorhead City, or it was parked in Gallant's Channel, a couple of months ago, and I took some video. And, I'm always in that area, so I love painting boats, and so this one is called Redemption, and so I've just finished that up. But I'm always working on stuff. We have our first Fridays, as you know, at Gallery 311. So I'm always trying to get some new work on the walls down there every month. And I have a show at Chef's Palette coming up at the end of this month for February. So I'm trying to get them work, and also I like to, get my galleries fresh work. So there's always something in the pipeline here. So.
Excellent. Busy artist that you are. So let's go ahead and roll on into our questions. And the first one, and it's frankly my favorite of the 5, is what is your earliest memory of making art of any kind?
Okay. So I suppose my earliest memory of creating art is when I was in primary school. And back when a teacher was absent, this was, before the days of substitute teachers. If a teacher was absent, the class would be divided up amongst other teachers' classes and would be sat around the perimeter of the ongoing class. And, you'd be given color and paper and crayons to keep us quiet. And so my joy was twofold, I suppose, because I loved art. There was the whole day of doing nothing but art. Mm. And then you'd be sitting in a class that, had to do spelling tests and, recite their times tables, and we were doing nothing but art. So I've always loved art through school, and I suppose those are kind of my earliest memories. Mm. And then outside of school, when I was a teenager, probably, or preteen really, 11, 12, somewhere in there, my dad had a side hustle of creating garden ornaments out of concrete. Mm. And so he approached me about painting some of them to see if the painted ones would sell better than the unpainted ones. And so I was painting up a storm of, garden ornaments, little leprechauns and little guys with wheelbarrows. And so we'd sell them to passing tourists. We lived on a main road near the cliffs of Moher, just these gorgeous cliffs. And so we'd have passing tourists that would stop, and they always would buy the little ones so that, they'd fit in their luggage, that kind of thing. And so that kind of evolved into me carrying a backpack of concrete garden gnomes around with me. And I would go to all the tourist hotspots and sell these little gnomes. And there was great incentive in it because, we were charging £2 or £3. I would get £2 or £3 for each one that I painted. My dad would get if something was $12, I might make 3, or it was Irish pounds back then. And so that was kind of, I suppose, my first real art endeavor. It was, I suppose I was a real entrepreneur back then when I was 13 and 14 years old. And I kind of did that. I remember doing that up until I was about 16 because I had a photograph of myself. You find it on my Instagram page where I'm sitting at the Cliffs of Moher with my little sign that says "Leprechauns for Sale," and I guess I was making some money back then doing that, and I had a pocket change. But yeah, those are my earliest memories, I suppose.
Oh, that's marvelous. And clearly that laid some groundwork for the business side of being an artist, which so many artists struggle with. You know, you were out hustling your art from the get beginning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The business side of art is always a struggle. I think I always find that's my biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
But you have to do it. It's just part of the process, as you know, with your photography business. Just you got to pay some attention to the business side of things.
The greatest artists in the world won't necessarily sell any art or even be known if they aren't willing to get out and do some marketing.
That's right.
You know,
Absolutely.
in my medium of landscape photography, everybody knows Ansel Adams, right? I mean, he's the
Right.
godfather, right? One of the reasons we all know it is he marketed his stuff. I mean, he aggressively went after the National Park Service to say, hire me to go document these national parks in their early years.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of hustle and willing to, market himself that allowed us to know who he is. As one of the things I try to remind myself, it's we
Yeah.
struggle sometimes to say, "Oh, I don't want to, paint my art, with the sales or marketing." I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's what you have to do these days.
You absolutely do. Because I was creating art for a long time, but I didn't know how to really put myself out there, and it's not my nature. I'm a little I'm kind of an introspective kind of person, and that's another thing that I have to learn is you just really have to kind of engage the public a little bit with your art, and that's why the first Fridays at our gallery are so important to me. I'm nearly always there, so yeah.
Excellent. Well, your current medium is acrylic. What brought you to that, and what is it about the medium that keeps you going in it?
Yeah, I currently work in acrylics, but that was actually born out of my days as an oil painter. I taught myself how to paint in oils by watching, videos of people like John Potashnik and Bill Davidson, um, and I loved oil paints, but they take a long time to dry, that kind of thing, and um, so then I started taking local workshops in 2015, 2016 with some really great Raleigh-based artists like Nicole Kennedy and Eric McRay. And it was Eric McRay who convinced me to try acrylics because he had had a tremendous amount of success with them. And, I didn't love the slow drying nature of oils. So, especially the cadmiums. Um, the cadmiums take forever to dry, the reds and the dark Gales and so that was the impetus for switching to acrylics. And acrylics sometimes get a bad, they kind of have a reputation of being inferior to oils in some circles, but I
Mhm.
have found that acrylics have come a long way from what they were. And they used to be kind of chalky and really matte, and they weren't loaded with a lot of pigment. But acrylic paints have come a long way. They're a lot more refined now than what they were, and you find a lot of acrylic paint that's absolutely loaded with pigment and very bright and saturated hues. So, and I also invest a lot of money into my paints, and I choose higher quality pigments. All those little tubes of paint have numbers on them, and those numbers, refer to the amount of pigment in each one. So, And I also discovered that, acrylic paint, you can make it behave like an oil by adding additives and retarders. Um, so I think I still paint like an oil painter. The way I sort of lay in color and layer, but you don't have to deal with having to wait 6 months to varnish a painting. And
Mm.
um, so, I really enjoy being able to finish a painting, and then, a couple of days later, I can go ahead and varnish it, and I can go ahead and put a frame on it and put it on the wall and sell it. So, but not to say that I wouldn't return to oils, because, I still have my oil paints, and there's a wonderful luminosity with oil paints. Um, but I love the speed of working in acrylics, and I'm glad I've made the switch, and and it's possible in the future that a lot of artists will work in both mediums, oils and acrylics. But I think for beginning, someone who's beginning, um, if you start off in acrylics, you kind of really expedite your painting process, and I just happen to have stuck with acrylics, um, so yeah.
Well, that's helpful for me because I'm not being a painter. I don't know some of the ins and outs of painting. I knew that oils took longer, but I didn't realize it was months before you could varnish it. Uh,
Yes, and there are oil painters who do use additives to expedite the drying process, and with oils you have to layer in your painting a lot differently than you would in acrylic. There's a saying in oil painting, thick over thin. And I remember one time with a painting that I had done, of a dolmen. It's a Irish, prehistoric, stone
hmm.
sculpture thing. And I remember doing this painting that I loved in oils of this dolmen. And um, and I went ahead and I varnished it, and I probably varnished before the painting was really dry. And
Hmm.
then I put the frame on it, and I put it on my wall. And like probably a year or two later, the painting just cracked. It's all crackled.
Hmm.
So that will happen to you if
Yeah.
you don't, layer in your painting correctly in oils, and you don't have to really worry about that with acrylics. So, um, and as I say, if you buy good quality paints, um, you should have a painting that looks very similar to an oil painting, in the end.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that bit of education.
You're welcome.
What inspires your art? Where does it come from?
The great outdoors, I would say, inspires my art. I've always had a great love for the natural world, and growing up in Ireland laid the foundation for my appreciation of the landscape. If it wasn't raining, we would be sent outside as children. I have four siblings, and we would be out climbing beach boulders or riding our bikes around the picturesque landscape. And I used to have one of those disposable cameras. Now Chip, probably had one of the. You probably had an Olympus or a Nikon or something, But do you remember the old disposable cameras
Oh,
where
sure.
you'd put the roll of film in the back,
Yeah.
and the rolls of film, I think, came. It was either 12, 24, or 48, something like that. So
Yeah.
you had to be really selective over the photos you took with
Indeed.
the cameras back then, because film was expensive. And I would take snapshots, of scenery, and
Hmm.
just because I loved the landscape. I loved, how the light would kind of fall on the land, and to this day, I take snapshots in my head for what could be potentially my next painting. And I sort of use those lessons ingrained with working with sort of minimal technology, i.e., the disposable camera, um, to it helps me think about my composition, how I would frame it. And I also, if I take a photo nowadays with an iPhone, which, I love
Hmm.
my iPhone, I always put my photograph in the black and white, which is, and I don't know if photographers do this or not, but we create a value study in the black and white, and we can see if that photograph would make an interesting painting. What are the values like? What are the different gradations of darks or whites to black, the different gradations of gray in between. What would that look like if you were to transfer it to a painting? So I do that all the time, and I think that kind of goes back to my days with taking photographs of the scenery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and I also have to paint scenes that resonate with me. Um, a lot of the places that I paint, I know these places, I go to these places, I love these places. I love coastal North Carolina. I love the big skies there. Um, and, there's a simplicity in eastern North Carolina along the coast that I think is sort of representative of me in a way. And when I create art, or a lot of my coastal work, I think is a kind of my response to what I'm painting. I'm sort of, yeah, I always want to try and capture the feel of a place, and lately I've been shooting video, not so much taking photographs, but I'll shoot video, which is very helpful. Um, because a photograph, when I'm shooting something with my iPhone, it sort of compresses the image a little bit. But if I
Mm-hmm.
videotape it, it's more sort of, three-dimensional, and when you got to play it back, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll pause it and put it in value studies and stuff, and then I can really see where the light's coming from in the video, so I can transfer that to my painting, and how
Mm-hmm.
the, sometimes it's hard to tell, especially in a photograph. Um, you know, sometimes I'll run to the drugstore here to have a photo developed so I can paint it, and the quality of the photographs from a drugstore, as I know, is awful. And
Yep.
sometimes the photographs have so much blue in them, and you can't really tell where the light's coming from. So my latest thing is shooting video of the scene, and as well as taking notes while I'm at the scene. What am I asking questions? Why do I like the scene, and what is it about the scene that makes me want to paint the scene? So
Are you
um,
recording that audio with the video, or are you
I
taking
do
those notes?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I will say things. I have videos that, um, for instance, my last painting of Redemption, that boat out of in Beaufort. When I replay the audio, I hear myself saying, the white of the boat is much brighter than it appears on video, or um, the forefront of the water is not as dark as it appears in the video. To remind myself that when I go in to paint these things, that I'm as accurate as possible, because photographs will compress and even the video a little bit,
Oh yeah.
darkens. It shouldn't necessarily flat, makes everything look kind of flat. So yeah.
Interesting. I think that's a fabulous use of the technology to, you know, allow you to go back to that moment, literally.
Right. Yeah, yeah, technology is great. And, that's something that I, didn't have, I suppose, 15 years ago. We didn't have iPhones so technology has been very helpful. And I've taken workshops where the artists who are given the workshops are talking about these Photoshop applications and things to help with painting. And I really know very little about that, and I need to learn about that kind of stuff. But I'm not the most techie person in the world, and but I do absolutely love my iPhone for the value studies, for an immediate value study. And a lot of artists will bring the sketch pad with them and make a sketch, create their own value study, which is even more helpful. And I am starting to do that more than relying on the iPhone. So
Interesting. Well, thank you for that.
you're welcome.
So you've already given a few interesting tips here, but let's say you're sitting down with a new artist and they're just starting their artistic journey. What advice would you give them?
I would say feel the fear and get on with it. Because it can be quite intimidating when you're starting out. I know, I had a lot of insecurities myself about, showing the world my art or joining a gallery and applying to shows. Can be it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So I would also say with that, develop a thick skin for all the rejection, because you're not going to get accepted into all the shows you apply for. And um, so and that's a must in this
Mhm.
business. I would also say be authentic in your work, and that sort of goes back to what I just spoke to you about, just kind of being um, whatever it is you're doing, the scenes should resonate with you. A lot of shows that you apply for will not accept a painting that's based off somebody else's photograph.
Mm.
Um, and I'm a member of the American Impressionist Society, and if you didn't take the photo, you're not going to get into a show. It has to be your photo, your work, your experience. And so I've learned that it's very important. It's paramount to everything that I do. And I'll do commissioned work where people will give me their photograph, but if I'm entering a show, it's always going to be my own experience. So that's paramount piece of advice right there. Especially if you're really trying to be a serious artist, be authentic in your work. Let's see. Don't listen to the doubters, because there's always going to be people who, who are not going to have a tremendous amount of faith in you. I've had that experience, and I think that's been the impetus for me to push harder and try to be as successful as I can. You just kind of have to put in the noise canceling.
Mm.
I had pieces, I suppose, and there's people saying, well, maybe you should do this, and that doesn't look right, or, um, and, I have paintings that I was not happy with when I was, I would think they needed more work, and then I would ask somebody and say, oh yeah, you need to fix this, or and then what would happen is I'd end up overworking the
Mm.
painting, and that's a struggle with a lot of artists. We'll keep working on something until we kill it, and so my advice there is to maybe leave the painting alone early on. That a painting that's a little unfinished is usually a lot better than a painting that's overworked.
Mm.
So, and also, my last piece of advice, I think, is to enjoy the journey. It is a lot of work, but there's a tremendous amount of reward in it. So, yeah.
Well, those are some wonderful bits of advice there. And some of them unique that I haven't heard from other artists, which is great. And the authenticity is a recurring theme for most of the artists that have been on the show in some way, shape, or form. But some of those others, I think, really help expand perspective for starting artists. So I appreciate that.
Yes, you're welcome.
And that brings us to our final question, and that is, what artist or artists do you think folks should go check out? This can be somebody you've just discovered. It could be a longtime mentor, living, dead. Just who should we go check out?
Okay. Um, well, I definitely have to give a shout out to my fellow resident artists at 311. There's a lot of great talent down there, and we have figurative painters, landscape painters, abstract painters. So that's a local gallery here in Raleigh. Go check it out. I have a studio there, and it's just a great place. Um, and then artists that have inspired me, um, people like John Potashnik, Bill Davidson. I have a lot. I discover artists. I take these. Um, I'll be on a YouTube channel or something, and I'll be watching a video, streamlined videos, but they're a great way of discovering new artists.
Mm,
But there's this guy who a lot of artists know. His name is Eric Rhodes. Do you know if you heard of him? But
I don't think so.
he's an artist, but he's also a publisher of Plein Air magazine,
Mm,
and he does these live stream videos, and he will introduce. I mean, a lot of these are free live stream videos with nationally acclaimed and internationally acclaimed artists.
mm,
And all through the pandemic, I would watch every day. I would see who's on today, so I could discover a new artist and get
mm,
advice. And so he's a phenomenal person at sort of uniting artists and sharing knowledge. So even though he's not, he's the guy with the information.
mhm,
He's definitely influenced me. But I'm discovering new artists every day on Instagram. There's a guy called Kyle Ma, and he's a Taiwanese American, and I love his work. It's looks so. He's a plein air painter, and his work looks so effortless and so rich and
mm,
buttery. And there's another UK guy, Rob Poynton, and again his work is just beautifully painted, and just everyday scenes, simple scenes. People crossing the road to the bus, or but yeah, Instagram has been amazing. I think I've been on there for about a little over a year, and the I just follow artists pretty much, and it's been a great tool for looking at and being inspired by other artists and
mm.
their work. So um, yeah, that
Okay.
would be.
Well, you give me quite a few to go check out
I
there. I
did. I'm
appreciate
sorry. I
that.
couldn't narrow. I can't. It's so hard to narrow it down to just one. There's so many artists out there that I love.
And that's a wonderful problem to have.
It is.
Now, and for the audience who hasn't been following the podcast, links to all of these artists will be included in the show notes. So we'll take care of that. But here we are. We're at the end of our time, Annie. It has gone by incredibly quickly, but it has been excessively enjoyable for me. So
Oh,
thank you.
that's great. And Chip, you have to say you have a great radio voice for this. You really do.
Well,
So thank you though for having me. It's been a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
all righty. And if folks want to see Annie's work, they can go out to www.anniekinney.com, the 311 Gallery and Gallery 5 in Raleigh, as well as the Maddie King Davis Gallery in Beaufort out on the coast.
Thank you.
So, any place else that folks should check you out? What's your Instagram handle?
It's Annie Kinney lower score art. And so I think I pay more attention to my Instagram, than my website, which that's a bad business move. But, all my new work or what I'm working on appears on Instagram first before my website. So it's a wonderful tool to keep up with what I'm doing.
All righty. Well, thank you again, Annie. And for the rest of the audience, tune in next time for another conversation in the Artist Spotlight. Thank you for joining us. This has been the Artist Spotlight with Chip Freund. Find accompanying blog posts at chipfreundphoto.com/blog, and you may subscribe to our show on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like listening.